Hello, everyone. We are about to jump into a conversation about the 2017 movie It and the power of friendship. Not exactly the theme that I thought I would walk out of this movie with, seeing it for the first time for this conversation. But I will say this just before we introduce our guest, this movie was a beautiful movie about friendship that hit me like I got T-boned by this movie. And I couldn't be more excited to talk about it with my guest, Kevin Schaefer. So, Kevin, just as we start off a lot of these conversations asking, uh, who are you? What do you find yourself doing? Your work? And what was your first exposure to the 2017 movie It?
Well, Ryan knows I'm very excited because we've been talking about doing a podcast for a while. We have done on systematic ecology before, but I'm like,
We
when you
have.
started this one, I messaged you and I was like, dude, you got to bring me on this because
There's no way it could be
yeah.
avoided.
Oh my gosh, this is perfect. But and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this one since you've seen it for the first time. Because now I have so many recommendations for you. But yeah. Oh, I love so. Yeah, a little bit about me. So I am one of the co-hosts of Systematic Ecology. That's how Ryan and I connected. My day job, I work for a digital health publisher. Basically, I work with rare disease people all day as a content manager. Been there a long time, and then I do writing and podcasting outside of work. Where I've written a lot of comic scripts and done playwriting, kind of like all over the place there. Pop culture podcasting realm. I've been doing it since about 2015 or so when one of my longtime friends invited me on the one we were doing at the time. And
Yeah.
then I did a comics one for a while and then been with systematic ecology for the past couple of years. And the joke I was about to tell you right before that we started recording is because we were both talking about how we look like the majority of the podcast host demographic is that we are both white males with beards and we like movies, but I'm in a wheelchair, so I get to have a little bit of minority
Yeah.
separation there. Yeah. So yes, I
Gosh.
am bearded dude, white dude with glasses who talks about movies, but I at least have somewhat of a unique lens.
Hey, you've got that on me. I check all of the bland boxes. So you're way more unique than I am, Kevin. Well, I love that. I love that. But there is a lot of shared passion. I think we're going to talk a lot about
Yeah.
community based around shared things. But
Mhm.
what was your first exposure
Yeah.
to seeing it? Or maybe just in general,
Mhm.
because it is
Mhm.
based on a Stephen King novel and there was a TV adaptation in the early 90s. What was
Yeah.
your first exposure to the story, I guess?
Yeah, so I attempted to read the novel before the movie came out, and I think I got about midway through it. And I mean,
Okay.
I love Stephen King, but it is what like, and there are some of my like the Stephen King works. Like I've been reading King since about my like the first time I started reading him was like maybe early college or late high school when I picked up different seasons, which was
Okay.
his the collection of short stories that it has the stories that inspired Stand By Me and Shawshank Redemption. Really love
Oh, wow.
those, and it is like it's one that like I mean it's great and novel, but I joked even with friends who are huge Stephen King buffs that like it was kind of the point where and they well this is a constant debate among Stephen King fans as far as like is the novel a complete masterpiece and nothing needs to be cut out of it, or was it the point where his editors stopped caring and they just like let him make as long as he wanted and say because the book like and I do think it's a beautifully written book. It's just like the reason it got kind of exhausting the first attempt I read it is it repeats a lot of the same scenarios with Pennywise, and so it's just like
Okay.
okay, we've seen a lot of this kind of going back and forth. But I read enough of it going into the movie that the 2017 film came out, saw it in theaters, absolutely loved it. And I thought it really captured, the spirit of the novel, of the
Yeah.
universe. And, whereas like the 90s series is like really fun, there was obviously limitations there to the budget and the effects and everything. And
Yeah.
the 2017 film made an immediate impression on me. I mean, this goes without saying that Bill Skarsgård's performance is a huge part of that. But I
Yeah.
kept, but it was really, we were texting about this earlier. So you went into this thinking like that, like Pennywise was more of a slasher character, and you were completely surprised. And I love that
Lord.
that you had no
Lord.
idea that it was the cosmic horror origin, the YA aspect, all of these things that I think make it
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
I gosh, that will become a theme in this
Mhm,
conversation, most likely, that
mhm.
my perception of it going in was incredibly wrong.
Yes.
Because as I've been getting deeper into the horror genre, really
Mhm,
tackling movies that I never thought I would watch
mhm,
based on
mhm.
a misguided assumption that I couldn't handle them.
Yeah.
It was one of them where I was like, I just don't think I'll ever be able to handle that movie. And watching it for the first time, I was like, that was an amazing movie. Why would I stop myself from watching this movie? And that was, you were right, one of the, so I guess to speak to my first experience with the movie, that was my first time watching it. And I texted you, I was like, would it be fair to say that this is not this is a cosmic horror movie? And you immediately were like, yes, absolutely, 100%. And I was like, good, because I'm obsessed with this movie now, because I had always kind of looked at Pennywise up against other horror icons, and usually a horror icon is a slasher villain or the final girl that the slasher villain is up against. So when I see a killer clown, I'm like, okay, so he's like a proto Artie the clown. Couldn't have been more wrong, and I love that I was wrong. Love that I was wrong about that. And Kevin steered me straight on that assumption, and I fell in love with this movie. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I didn't know that either coming into the and that I think that's the brilliant thing about, the Stephen King universe is that there's this incredible fusion of genres influences because all of his works do take place in the same universe, even the more literary stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very I mean, a lot of the stories take place in Maine, but yeah, I mean, and you get to see more and more Easter eggs throughout even in the more, quote unquote self-contained stories, they all inhabit this world. And, Pennywise origin is absolutely fascinating because like you get a lot of that in the book, but then no, I don't want to derail the conversation too much because I know we're focusing on the 2017 film, but like now you got to watch chapter 2 and then you got to watch Welcome to Derry, which was
Welcome to
that
Derry.
one was a big surprise for me in terms of how good it was because
Hmm.
it was from the same director of it, was the co-creator, and directed several episodes. But season one, which came out in December, was something I looked forward to each week. And when I went into it, I was like, I mean, I'm sure this will be fun, but it's like, and they really make, an interesting prequel to it when you already know, okay, he's going to come back, this is like 27 years before
Yeah.
the events of the first movie, and they do an amazing job, and
Hmm.
particularly with the mythology and lore surrounding Pennywise, and like you said, the Lovecraftian cosmic horror elements. All of
Yeah.
that is expanded in a way that's not excessive or anything. It's really fascinating.
Huh. Well, I mean, now I'm down the rabbit hole, Kevin. I'm
Yep, you're
complete.
in it.
This is my weird, sick, twisted, upside down wonderland now.
Yep,
So
yep.
I'm all in. Before we kind of go at our topic of
Hmm.
friendship and the power of friendship,
Hmm.
and for those of you that might be watching or listening, you're like, the power of friendship. What is this? My Little Pony? No, it is this. It is, but this movie is a powerful representation of many different aspects of friendship. And we're going to tease that theme out. But before we do, I want to give a little bit of details and a little bit of a synopsis for those of you that may be approaching this and you're not overly familiar with the story. Hopefully, this can just help set a baseline for us that we can work from. It 2017 was released September 8th, 2017, here in the United States. It is based on the 1986 novel by Stephen King that we referenced just a little bit earlier. Directed by Andy Muschietti, who is really kind of, I mean, in charge of the adaptation universe now. This movie stars Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise the Dancing Clown that we already referenced. Bill Skarsgård kind of becoming known as like the monster creepy guy now because he was also Orlok in Nosferatu from a few Decembers back. I think it was last December. Jada Martell is Bill. Finn Wolfhard, who is famous for Stranger Things now. He is Richie. Sophia Lillis is Beverly. Jack Dylan Grazer is Eddie. Jeremy Ray Taylor is Ben. Chosen Jacobs is Mikey. Wyatt Olaf is Stanley. So, brief synopsis for It 2017 goes like this. 7 young outcasts in Derry, Maine, are about to face off against their worst nightmare, an ancient, shape-shifting evil that emerges from the sewer every 27 years to prey on the town's children. Banding together over a course of one horrifying summer, the friends must overcome their own personal fears to battle the murderous, bloodthirsty clown known as Pennywise. Boy, howdy, Kevin! Like this movie. Just before we jump into the discussion proper, we were talking about the YA and cosmic horror kind of elements of this. This movie is so perfectly a beautiful coming of age story about friendships and what are we going to do over the summer, guys? Like we've all had that kind of like, oh, we have this time that we can spend together and do fun stuff, and it goes horribly wrong because a cosmic entity is feeding on the children of this town. Famously, the movie starts with Billy's younger brother, Georgie, being pulled into the sewers by Pennywise. That opening scene was unsettling. I won't say it was scary because I kind of knew about that scene and the iconography of that scene, but holy cow, was it unsettling, Kevin. The themes of this movie, as we jump into it, how do you find those themes blending together? And then I'll jump into our discussion questions.
Sure. Well, and for me, to just to give a little background on like me and the horror genre is I was not a horror kid growing up. It's become one of my favorite genres, like as an adult. And for me, it was in college. A turning point was watching Shaun of the Dead for the first time in a film class because that fusion of comedy and horror
Yeah.
changed me forever. And that I think has stuck with me. I really like the how horror, there are so many different types, much like sci-fi, that you can blend different genres together. And I've always been a sucker for coming of age stories. So with
Yeah.
it specifically, like you said, it's like this, group of outcasts. But what I really like too is they're not all friends at the beginning. Like I
No.
like Stranger Things has the core group as already established, and then 11 comes in, and and Mike wants to bring her in. Lucas is more like, I don't know. But for the Losers Club, they're most of them are not really connected with each other. They're brought together because they're all outcasts. They're being picked on by Henry Bowers and his gang. I picked on is a understatement. They're like, Bowers is a psychopath. But
He
like,
is a
I
psychopath.
like being terrorized is more an apt description. But yeah, it's like they all have their, I love and it's not just okay, they assign them traits. The thing about King's writing and that translates really well into this film is that each character is so layered. Like they have their own interests, they have their own backgrounds, they have their own traumas. And, ultimately those are the things that bind them together. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things about it is that they're not all friends at the beginning and they're kind of like looped together. And then as they're thrust into this, horror odyssey together, they have to lean on each other and they have to learn about each other. And for instance, like Richie is one of my favorite characters, and I love
Yeah.
Finn Wolfhard's performance in it. And also spoiler alert to say, I know you're going to watch chapter 2, but Bill Hader
Yeah.
plays the adult version, and it's absolutely beautiful casting there. But what I love about
I do
Richie
love Bill
is,
Hader, so I'm excited.
oh my gosh, you're going to love that part by far. And what I love about Richie is he is concealing his trauma and his fears and his insecurities with humor. And like, he's trying to be that guy who's like, what are you all saying? The line that cracks me up is when, they're all starting to see Pennywise and he hasn't, he's like, is this all something only virgins can see? And
Is that why I
was
haven't
just,
seen it?
yeah. Right. I mean, like, and I just love it. And what's fascinating there is they actually do a little more. I don't want to spoil, but they do more with his character in part 2 that reveals kind of a different side to him, where some of the things he's keeping internalized, and that bleeds out. But you have him, and for me, I kind of relate to different characters in it. Like Bill is the obvious one because I'm a writer. So like there's elements of that. But also like I'm the youngest in my family. And I thought, yeah, I have two older siblings. So and then Stan, I also have elements where I relate to there because like he's a Jewish kid preparing for his bar mitzvah. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I mean, I remember the days of like being in like RAs and all that, and like preparing for
Yeah.
like reciting scriptures and stuff like that, and his dutiful studies there. I'm like, yeah, that was me there, in a different religion, but very much I could relate to that. So I like the different ways I see myself in different of the characters. And again, they're each just so layered. And this is something, you and I were talking about a little bit before of like, as far as, because what I love about your podcast is you're trying to like come up with like unique lenses for how to recontextualize iconic horror films and, view it through a really human lens. And for me, I think one of the reasons I'm always attracted to coming of age stories and to, groups of outcasts like this is so, I mentioned I work for a digital health publisher and I'm very active in my disability community. I have a neuromuscular condition called SMA, which is short for spinal muscular atrophy. And we have an annual conference where we all get together at Disney World, and it's just, like I mean, there are super highs and we're a lot of craziness. There's plenty of drama too because you put any group of people together, it's gonna happen. But I mean,
It
and
has to.
so it has to. And that's why I'm like, I'll see scenarios like this and I'm like, the way the characters interact, I'm like, I've seen that play out in my own community before. Like you
Yeah.
put different personalities and I mean, one of my best friends in that community is a DevOps engineer from Texas who is a sports guy and everything. And I'm like, in no other scenario would we meet and be friends, but like he's one of my best friends and like we love each other, but like only reason we ever met is because like we have this shared thing. And I've coined
Yeah.
it in my column as my disability as my dysfunctional muscle brain communication system. And like I've learned that as I said, but it's like, and so that's what's blinded. And like very much so the characters here have this shared trauma, this shared thing, and like they're kind of thrust together and they fight. They get along at other times. There's
Yeah.
this love triangle with Bill, and Beverly and Ben. And that continues to play out. Out of that, like there's all these elements you'd expect, and it's so well written and it's so well acted. And
Yeah.
that's really what draws me to the story so much. In addition to the cosmic horror, in addition to all I mean, the Pennywise moments are fantastic, but none of that would work without the characters at the front and center.
Yeah, like I love that you mentioned that because if we don't care about the losers, like the terror that Pennywise
Yes.
puts them through is muted.
It just becomes a comedy, or like I mean, it just
Right.
you're like a just slapstick, but like, and you're like, oh, that's funny. Whereas like you have this like yearning for them to be okay. You're like, "Yeah, I don't want like I want them to get through this because you fall in love with the characters.
Yeah, and speaking of that trope, but a very beautiful, very relatable trope of
Mhm.
the gang of kids, like your
Yeah,
neighborhood kids. I couldn't help but think, obviously nowadays it would be a younger person would say, it's the gang from Stranger Things. I instantly thought back to the Goonies, where
yeah,
this is the group of the kids going to get One-Eyed Willie's treasure, which I introduced my kids to Goonies for the first time, and they were like,
nice.
"These kids, there's no parents around," and I was like, "Yeah." Like they were just going off on an adventure. But this group of kids, the Losers Club, really, really reminded me of that beautiful expression of childhood, of coming of age, of youth, and their collective strength together, that shared status as outsiders, Kevin, that you were just referencing,
Mhm.
those bonds, they help them kind of cope with other things in their lives, like Beverly's abuse from her father is
Right,
probably the most visceral example,
right.
but also Billy experiencing Georgie's kidnapping, what he
Hmm,
assumes
hmm.
he's lost. They got to go find him. Mike is an outsider whose grandfather is very intense.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things going on in these characters' personal lives. Like you said,
Hmm.
they flesh out these characters well and efficiently. But the collective, can you maybe speak more to the collective strength of that shared identity as outsider.
Yeah, because I think, like, one of the moments that hits me when the club really comes together is when Ben is being terrorized by Bowers, and, like, at that
Yeah,
point, all the other kids who have been at the school a while, they're like, "Oh, yeah, Easter," and they don't even really know Ben at that point. He's the kinda, the heavy set kid who hangs
he's
out
the
at the
new kid.
library, and he's new and doesn't know anyone, but they're not going to let anyone else be. I mean, in that Bowers looks like he's about to kill him. He takes out a knife and everything. Again, this is the thing about these. I'm like, where were the parents? Like, like, what is going on here? You gotta love it. But I love that scene when they come to his rescue, and of course it leads to a Pennywise encounter. But that's the moment where it's like, yeah, they don't know anything about Ben. They don't even know if they're gonna bring him into their group or not. But it's just like they're like, hey, you're not gonna mess with someone else too.
Yeah,
We got your back. And so that's a defining moment. And then from that point on, I mean, yeah, they have all these adventures, and I love that there are moments of levity throughout too. It's not just a constant terror and we're being ripped apart.
yeah,
It's like, I mean, there's so much depth to it, and they're going to movies, and I love the scenes when they're going to the pond and all that, and
yeah,
then when they do the promise at the end of, like, going back 27 years if he shows up. Specifically with this film, and I like looking at the adaptation, because the novel goes back and forth throughout between the kids and the adults, so it plays
huh,
out in a non-chronological manner. And with the movies, they chose to do just the first movie set entirely, in this case in the 80s, like, and then do the time jump in the sequel. And I do think it worked really well, because and like there's is a lot of criticism toward chapter 2, because like you don't have as much of that coming of age element. I
yeah,
still quite enjoy chapter 2. Part 1 is superior for that reason, but I'm glad they did it that way, because it would have been a lot to try to follow the structure of the book, split it up into 2 parts, and not really have a resolution by the end of the first. I liked that
yeah,
they did it the way they did, and it just makes it so much stronger to get them an entire movie with them in a coming of age setting, and the formation of the Losers Club, and going through all this together. And then
yeah,
yes, Pennywise returns in the sequel, and they have to fight him as adults. But yeah, that's what I really like about how they chose to adapt it. And yeah, it's that collective nature. And again, going back to my own community, and like both with work and with the SMA community, like, I mean, we've been through a lot together. I mean, when I tell people outside the SMA community, like, how many friends, I'm 32, and when I say, like, how many friends I know who have died over the years, like, they're like, whoa. So, yeah, and I'm like, whereas, like, in our community, we get that that's very, like, I mean, we get it. That's a very, and like the same goes for, like, all the other crazy things we deal with.
yeah,
And we just get each other, and we joke about it. We have very dark humor. And that's why I see myself a lot in these, like, so
yeah,
even though I wasn't really like bullied as a kid or anything like that, like I had good friends, all that, but there's still, when I'm hanging out with my friends outside the disability community, still have a great time. Like, but there's still this added element of understanding and connection in, my disability community, where we can
yeah.
have totally different interests and backgrounds, but we get each other, and that's what this movie does really well.
I love that you said the added element of understanding, because
Hmm.
a lot of times there is that unspokenness of it where you don't have to over explain where you're coming from, because that
Hmm.
person is coming from a that other person in that community is coming from similar enough of a place that
Yeah.
it shortcuts the explanation. I think of that with being in a ex post church community, going to things
Yes.
like theology of
Yes.
your camp, and being
Yes.
there is a shared language of hurt. There's a shared language of past there.
Hmm.
I remember once on a another friend's podcast, I said there was a lexicon of pain that we were both all reading from, and it
Yes.
shortcuts things. And I find that so the bonding is weird. Like you said, there's a dark humor about it. Like these these kids in the Losers Club, they have a dark humor about what's happening to them, and they still
Mhm.
handle it like kids. Also, to a degree, it kind of reminded me of the gang from The Breakfast Club, where
Oh
they're
yeah,
they're
absolutely.
all dealing with something, and it always comes out like they think Emilio Estevez has a perfect life, and he's like, I do not have a perfect life.
Yep.
How there are these assumptions that go around like, oh, that person's got, that person doesn't have anything wrong. Well, Henry Bowers is abusive because he's being abused.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
Mike is very cold about things because he's being raised by a man who's very cold about things. There's that sharedness, and I find that to be, I don't know, comforting. It's incredibly comforting.
Oh, absolutely. And well, I mean, church stuff too. Like, I mean, I talk about this in my theology, but like, I mean, I'm an ex-conservative evangelical who, like, I thankfully I found a very progressive church in the last few years, and oh, we have that same nature where like I mean, we joke that like we talk to week about like, okay, you want to go over another evangelical trauma, like of our upbringing, and we have that shared community, and it's like I mean, we do and systematic theology. I love it because like and yes, there are hosts there who like have different theological views than I do, and
Yeah,
that's okay. But like we very much strive and we very much maintain a culture of inclusivity there where, we respect different viewpoints and we're not gonna like and we understand that like people come from church trauma, but like we're striving to do something better there. And yeah, I love that. I mean, Will Rose invited me to it few years ago, and I love doing it because I mean it's fun geeking out. But I like, that's where I like of like, yeah, I can have different viewpoints with, even people who are still more in the like a conservative circle, but like they
yeah,
have a respect for me that, and I unfortunately I saw a lot of too much of you know, the extremist side of that, growing up.
yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, I just think it speaks to all of us being able to hopefully find that found family, uh,
yes.
where that how friendship, when it's at its truest, deepest, purest form, it can be more powerful than even birth family in a way. With going back to it, there are key moments in the film where they do things as a group. They enter the sewer as a group.
Hmm.
They enter the
Yeah.
Neibolt house as a group. That bond is enhanced by them experiencing similar things. And there's this key theme throughout that if they stay together, that makes them infinitely stronger. And there's a few cool action scenes where physical weapons affect Pennywise, and we get a cool you
Yeah.
know like the bolt through his head, or they try to fight him physically, but their ultimate tool against Pennywise is the fact that they don't give up and they don't stray from each other. How do you think that speaks to more real life scenarios, Kevin? How like when we stay together, it allows us to conquer things that we couldn't on our own.
Oh yeah, because I mean that's what I love about the house scene and like the final battle and all that is like because right before that they do split up and they go like and they're about to give up and they're just like this is stupid, and they have their own conflicts and it's only natural when you have a group of kids that have different personalities and and all this like collective trauma like they're gonna butt heads and they do for a time and then it's like once Beverly goes missing they're reunited and they go into this final battle. And I love the final battle. I love this, but it's very much it's their coming together and their combined strength helps, defeat higher power. And I feel like it is just so much in today's age. Like A, we strive for individuality, and B, we're so disconnected in many ways, despite
Yeah,
having more tools than ever to connect. And like yeah, I've learned, I think, a lot about myself in recent years, especially post COVID, of like, I certainly like my time alone, but at the same time, like, I absolutely need community, even when it's hard, even when it's frustrating. Like, yes, I mean, working at the same company for 9 years, you can bet there have been many conflicts, even with people I care about. And there have been many times where I've wanted to give up, but the ultimately, and same in yes, making me same in churches, like, it would there are many times where it would be way easier to disassociate from all of that and become a hermit, but I would be missing out on something fundamental to what I think is the human experience.
Yeah, I love that you phrased that way. The quintessential nature of
Mhm.
community and togetherness to the human experience. No man, no woman, no person is an island. And
Right.
I feel like that phrase is tested in this movie because they actually, several different members of the Losers Club, they bring up to Billy, like, hey, Georgie is dead. Like,
Right.
why are we
Right.
doing this?
Right.
But then several other kids go missing, and then Beverly, like you said, Beverly goes missing, and they're like, how many more of us have to go missing for us to care? How many more of us
Yep.
have to get dragged down in the sewers or go down there where all of us are going to float? How much more of that has to happen before we as a collective unit do something that isn't just self how do you say this, that only benefits our own
Right.
well-being.
Right. Right. Absolutely. No, it's I mean, and that's the thing. Like I remember coming out of the first time I saw the movie in theaters, and like yeah, like my dad does like is not really into horror and stuff, and he was asking what it was about, and I mean I gave the basic synopsis, but I was think about it after I'm like, no, it's so much more than like the like this terrorizing clown like being terrorizing kids. This is exactly what you said. It's a story about friendship. It's a story about growth and community, and those are the strongest horror stories where I mean I love a
Yeah,
good slasher, and I love a good one that is just like fully comedic and slapstick and all that, and you're not meant to take that seriously, but I
yeah,
really love the ones where there's a deeper meaning to it, and where the
yeah,
horror element is about empathy and it's not about shock value. There's a real heart that goes into the characters, into the storytelling, and that is real. Like anyone who thinks like, oh, Stephen King is just concocting new ways to scare the crap out of people. Like, I mean, yes, in some ways, yeah, but like, but the strength of all of Stephen King's works is the heart, it's the character, and that's why he's transcended not just the horror genre, but into literary circles and become one of the greatest writers and the most famous writers of all time. Is like he appeals to intellectuals and to mainstream audiences, and that's a hard
yeah,
feat to do, but at the core of his stories, it's the characters and it's the stories that you're really compelled with.
yeah. I couldn't agree with you more on that. It's if Pennywise would be a terrifying villain in any kind of genre. What
Right.
truly makes him terrifying is that he is assaulting this group that is in the first half very tenuous. They break apart. They question their loyalties a lot.
Yeah.
But once they realize that they are infinitely stronger together than they are apart, I think it speaks to, like you said, nowadays in 2026, having all the accessibility in the world, like having access is not a problem anymore. Having connection still seems to be a struggle. And I think that powerful entities, powerful forces know that you just because you can have close, meaningful, never say die, loyal relationships doesn't mean you will. And I think that's where this film also takes a jump for me, that they stick by each other even when it is very, very against their own interests to do so. I love when Richie says at the end of the movie where he's like, Billy, like Georgie's dead. You dragged us down here into a sewer. You're having us do all these things, and I guess we're gonna have to kill this clown. Because there's that moment where he's just like, oh my gosh, is Richie gonna like bail at the last minute? He's like, no, like he's my ride or die because we're going through this together. He doesn't choose the easy way out. He doesn't choose the path of disconnection in that moment. Are there other for you, Kevin? Are there other specific moments in the film where that bond is solidified and it leads to Pennywise's destruction for now? But are there any other moments in the film that maybe speak to this theme of friendship, community, and why it is so powerful in the face of fear?
I think it goes back to that the scenes in the pond there when they're just swimming. It's something so simple, but it's this visual element, I love when they come back to it at the end when they make the seal with each other, and they say we're gonna come back in 27 years if he shows up again. Like I think that is really powerful. And then just simple things of them going around town riding bikes. It's another classic imagery that's been done in Stand By Me and Stranger Things is, them on the bikes, them riding around town. It's very 80s. But it's those images, those moments. Trying to think what else. And also, I think when Beverly makes the decision to join the group too is really powerful because she's the only girl in the group. Like, she has argue. I'm like, well, I hate to like compare each of their traumas, but like, but I mean, she's probably like the most unsafe. Like I mean, like
Yeah,
in her area, like and it takes. I think for her, it's the hardest by far to open up to other people because of what she can't trust her own father
yeah,
because of it. And so how is she going to trust anyone else? And so that's a big moment when she does open up and she joins like Liz Club and starts hanging out with them because she's not one of the boys and she's been outcasted and bullied by other girls and everything. And so for her to open herself up and be part of this group, that's a really big turning point as well. I mean, they each have
yeah.
elements of that. Mike being the only black kid,
Homeschooled
each of
kid.
them,
He's
right?
not even out to
Exactly.
school.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Ben being the new one, like that. I love that. Yeah, they each have their own. So it's a big moment when any of them like kind of join. Richie and Eddie are any friends, but yeah, when they all kind of come together, they're really taking it, it's a big leap. I mean, it's almost like that like when you're sitting at a new table at lunch in school growing up, like it's just not perfect, and that feeling can carry over into adulthood too. Like if you go to
yeah.
a like party or a new group or whatever. Or when I first went to the church I go to now, like I only knew one other family there, and I went by myself to check it out. And yeah, I mean, it was a little like it's like okay, new environment, and I'm wondering, I'm like, being probably the only wheelchair user there, like, how's it gonna go? And yeah, it takes a lot to make that first step, even as an
Yeah.
extroverted person.
Well, I love what you said there about when you step into those new environments.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of that apprehension, and it's so weird how like even in adulthood, like you and I are both adult men, and I'm sure there are
Right,
scenarios where we're just like we walk in and we're like, oh my god, it's junior high all over again. My
right,
god, it's
right.
high school all
Yeah,
over again. Am I the
yes.
cool kid?
Oh my
Do I
gosh.
get to sit at that table? Do I get to talk to that person? Will they
Mhm.
talk to me if I talk to them? It is kind of funny how coming of age stories are always relevant because we are all at certain points in our life going into that different age, and how these coming of age themes, they do become perpetually resonant for those same reasons of belonging, community, friendship, all of that. It's incredibly powerful. Kevin, as we kind of like just wrap up it, and I know maybe someone checked out this conversation and was like, but they didn't talk about that clown as much. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's not really the lens we're going at the movie
Yeah.
through. But we did love Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, just with the Losers Club example of their vulnerability, their unity, their loyalty in the face of Pennywise, the monster. How is there anything else maybe we can speak to using Pennywise as a conduit to talk about things like anxiety, isolation, bullying? You said bullying. I'm like Henry Bowers is terrorizing them. But
You
it
totally.
those scenarios as people walk about their daily lives
Mhm.
and encounter these things as adults, I'm not predicting that maybe a lot of junior high school kids are checking this out. Adults are checking this out. How can a coming of age story be resonant for them as they face their version of Pennywise in their adult lives? Is there any way you wish to speak to that?
There's multiple angles, but I like the immediate thing that comes to mind, but like, okay, we went through this collective trauma of the pandemic as a society just a few years ago. And I definitely do not think we have fully processed that. We kind of like
Mm,
we try to put that in the past of like, oh, that was the thing that happened. And, we're going to try to move on. And that's been one of the most damaging things we've done
mm,
is ignoring the reality of what we went through, where the entire world came to a halting point, and we had to adjust to being at home. Like I mean, it affected our work lives, our personal lives, everything, and we just tried to put that in the past when the effects of it are very much, it's showing up in everything from our relationship to technology, our relationship to politics, all of these things. And I absolutely think that anxiety, I see that anxiety everywhere in social scenarios. So as far as like how to deal with that, like the Pennywise in our lives, like, yeah, I just think we absolutely need more genuine connection. And, whether it's in person and it's speaking as someone who, my community, yeah, we like the SMA conference, we have it once a year and it's great. But like we primarily, a lot of us talk online and we have,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. Like you can still have genuine connection over Zoom. Systematic technology. We do
absolutely.
the recording time, what we're doing right now. But whatever form you're doing it in, whether it's in person, whether you're talking over Zoom, like we as a society absolutely need to have more real connections and not surface level ones, because
Mm.
that's, I think, one of the most damaging things in our society. And I genuinely believe that's like one of the biggest causes for the Trump era and AI and all this stuff. Like, I mean, it's like social isolation and anxiety has created so many, and it's led to evil billionaires taking over the world. That's, I mean, there's my thesis for today.
Just to scratch the surface a little, but I love that because I think that there's so much truth in that since since especially COVID, but over the last 10, 12, 15 years, there has
Mhm.
been this growing po- the growing pockets where instead of the ability to come together around a shared, maybe a shared exclusion, maybe a shared rejection, maybe a shared loser status, like our band of heroes in it, there is this ostracization. There are more loser club versus Bowers gang
Yeah.
conflicts popping up everywhere. And I think the inability to see of why is there a conflict here? Why is there a conflict here? Why is this other person lashing out at others? What's going on behind that surface? And yeah, the kids, the losers club, they're not responsible for how Butch Bowers treats his son. They're not responsible for it,
Right.
but they are
Right.
on the receiving end of it. They're not
Hmm.
responsible for Pennywise, but they're on the receiving end of it. And if
Hmm.
they had fractured, if they had continued to blame each other, if they had continued to go their separate ways, like I just want to have a good summer, and Billy's saying, like, if you say we're gonna have a good summer, like one more fucking time, like that's I feel like sometimes that's how that's how that divide can be quantified in emotion. It's like
Hmm.
if you say we just need to have a good summer one more time, I'm gonna freak out. I love that Billy has that line. I do
It's
think
classic.
there's yeah, this movie's also hilarious. This
It
movie's
really is. No,
hilarious.
yeah. And that was one of the things when I went in the first time, I didn't think I would laugh as much as I did. I mean, I
Oh, it,
saw it twice because I remember when I went like opening weekend, then I went with my brother about a week or two later. And my brother's not even that big into horror either, and he loved it too. And I remember we both laughed a lot.
it,
It's amazing how much joy and terror and hope there is packaged into this, what, 2.5 hours.
I think that is probably a pretty good way to sum up the human experience. As you've been saying, Kevin, is like joy, hope, terror, all of it. Why not all of it? Kevin, thank you so much for
All
breaking down
package it
it
all
with
in.
me
Yep.
and friendship and why friendship matters in the face of fear, of terror, of things that try to separate us so it can feed on us. Friendship, good, honest, deep, consuming friendship matters so much because in the face of these entities we don't understand, it can kind of act as a last ditch hope. So I really, really appreciate the time, man. Thank you for recommending this and kind of like being like foot to the fire. You gotta watch it. It was a fantastic experience.
I'm actually really glad we picked this one because when you asked me what's kind of your five most influential horror movies, I was like, ooh, I got like, and I would have been happy to talk with any of those, but
Yeah,
I am actually so glad you picked this one because this was great.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Kevin, thanks so much, man.
dude,
You
this was
did
great. Thanks so much for having me.
those of you that are checking this out, we're going to keep having these conversations. I'm not exactly sure where this is following in the schedule, so we have more coming up after this. But until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one. Just remember that the horrors persist, but so can we.